he actually tried to make OpenClaw secure by default. So what he did is he threw it in a container and then he locked it down so that it, it didn't have communications and stuff like that. The way that I would secure something to start with. And he said, ironically enough, when you lock it down so that it can't spawn new processes, it's useless because the whole value of the claw model is that it will go out and it will do things.
Tom, you know what you sound like? You sound like the person who said, you know what we really need to do to secure my network? Let's disconnect from the internet.
It works for the NSA.
You'll be really secure. You'll be really secure. Of course, that's not a viable model. But, we've had a little experience with Claw here at TechStrong as well. And the model I've put in place is it has to be on an isolated machine. So generally we run them on Mac Studio. Or Mac Mini, excuse me. We'll put them on a Mac Mini. On top of the Mac Mini, we run them in a VM. And then, and here's the key thing, we start with a zero trust. Everything is off by default, and we turn on one thing at a time as necessary when needed. Another thing is each agent has to have its own identity. And what I mean by identity, I give it its own Google mailbox, its own Google identity. So rather than it logging into my Google mailbox or as myself, right, giving it assets to do that, it has its own identity. And then I can more tightly fine tune where and what it can do. Because obviously giving it nothing, you're going to get nothing, right? Like I unplugged from the internet. Geez, none of those websites work. So that's worked for us. It's still not the best way to do it, but that's what we've been doing.
So I think the identity conversation is amazing, and it's one area where I am doing a little bit more of research on. And one of the things that's popping up is, Alan, let's take the complexity that exists. So, for example, you have an agent, as you mentioned, to whom you've given a Google account, right? Are you counting what happens when that agent, for whatever reason, as Tom mentioned, they start to do their things. That agent decides to spawn a copy of itself, and now you have two agents using the same Google account.
So this is something where we need to have more maturity in the model. It's the concept of a master agent, and they spawn sub-agents. Sub-agents must take on the identity, or should, I hate to use the word must, but should take on the identity of its master agent. It cannot have, because what does a sub-agent do? Well, it's a piece of the master that has a particular specificity and is rather usually ephemeral, right? It's running on a short period of time and done. It should not have its own identity. It has to appear to be the master agent.
But how do you tell apart? If one of the sub-agents does something bad, how do you tell the sub-agents apart? So I'm just saying,
that's a real problem. No, I mean, there has to be some fingerprint or some notation that, I am a sub-agent of Fernando's master agent or something along that line. But it cannot have greater access than the master is what I guess I'm trying to say.